Dawda to briefly provide one or two updates on the transitional justice process. The Honorable Minister has made reference to the draft constitution. It's my pleasure to inform the honorable members of the press that Cabinet has recently concluded its deliberation on the draft constitution. The report is now to be compiled by the Ministry of Justice with a view to gazetting the draft constitution. As you know, we will require a period of about 3 months and subsequently another 10 days to complete the gazetting cycle for the draft constitution. So hopefully all indications are that we could have the draft constitution before the National Assembly in the last quarter of this year. So probably by December we will have the National Assembly deliberating on the draft constitution. You will all recall that this is a promise that the government has made, that it would bring back the constitution, and it has accordingly done so, and the process is now on. So we will have the draft constitution before the National Assembly. Having said that, I know one matter that is of concern. Madam Yang, you should be by my side here. One matter that has been of concern has been the special tribunal which the Gambia seeks to establish in collaboration with the Economic Community of West African States. You would all recall that the Gambia requested the cooperation of ECOWAS in the establishment of the special tribunal. Of course, the Commission responded positively to this request, and what we now have is that the decision, that's the statute establishing tribunal, was tabled before the Mediation and Security Council of ECOWAS. The Mediation and Security Council is the body comprising honorable ministers and ambassadors and of ECOWAS, and when it was tabled on the 3rd of July, it was considered and deferred to the next ordinary session of the Authority of Heads of State and Government. So I know it's been stated in some quarters that the decision or the statute establishing the special tribunal was rejected by the ECOWAS. That is not the case. What happened was that the Mediation and Security Council of ECOWAS considered the statute but deferred it to its next meeting in December and wanted the ambassadorial meeting to first consider the statute and endorse it and then transmit it to the Mediation and Security Council. So this is what happened. So the statute will now go to the ambassadorial meeting, and hopefully that meeting will be convened here against perhaps in the next month or so, way before the December meeting. And once it is considered by the ambassadorial meeting, it will now be transmitted to the Mediation and Security Council. That's the level of the ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defense. And of course, they will deliberate on it and then send it to the Authority of Heads of State and Government. So the process is still on. There was a procedural hitch which delayed the consideration by the Authority of Heads of State and Government. I know also for a fact that the statute was discussed at the level of the ECOWAS Parliament, and they rejected the statute. But I just need to state that in as much as it's desirable to have the Parliament endorse the statute, we believe that the Parliament was not adequately briefed on the statute. There was some lack of understanding with regards to its full content and scope. Nevertheless, we would be embarking on a campaign to discuss with the parliamentarians so that they could be adequately briefed on the statute. But let me also hasten to state that the decision by the ECOWAS Parliament is considered non-binding. It's purely advisory, and the final decision on the establishment rests solely with the authority of heads of state and government. It is not a decision. It is not for the ECOWAS Parliament to take a decision. Their role is merely advisory. But of course, it is imperative that they are also carried along so that there could be a broader consensus on the establishment of the special tribunal. So that is where we are, and it has dawned on us that we just need to do more. The experts have done their work. The experts committee of the ECOWAS has already endorsed the statute. The statute has also been endorsed by the justice ministers of ECOWAS, and now it's for us to work on the political process to see how we can dialogue and carry out further consultations with member states and have the statute approved. But I mean, you would all recall what was done in the case of Hissène Habré, where the Senegalese government requested the support from the African Union and got the African Union to help in the establishment of the extraordinary chambers, which finally tried Hissène Habré in Senegal, because you cannot carry out these trials using your local jurisdiction and your local courts. It is in that same spirit that we took the decision to work with ECOWAS. ECOWAS being closer home and giving its relationship in terms of our transitional justice process, and the fact that so many citizens of ECOWAS have also perished and were victims during the 22 years regime. We have had the massacres that took place here, and some of the citizens of ECOWAS suffered that tragedy. And we felt we could work with ECOWAS, and ECOWAS has agreed to work with us so that we could establish this special tribunal, internationalize it, and endow it with jurisdiction to try the crimes that took place here. Having said that, I think another aspect of the transitional justice process that I want to bring to your attention relates to the Victims Reparations Act that was passed by the National Assembly in November 2023. We are working on the actualization of the act. As you all know, the purpose of the act is to ensure that victims are adequately compensated, notwithstanding that the TRRC had some compensation mechanism and actually did administer some reparations for victims. Government has thought it fit to pass this act and ensure that all victims are actually considered and given adequate reparations. So that process is on, and the selection of the commissioners is almost completed. So very soon we would have a functioning commission administering reparations for victims. I think I would, at this stage, let my colleague, Madam Safinan, perhaps talk about the medical board, the peace and reconciliation aspect, and maybe enforcement for parents. With your kind permission, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, SG, for giving me the opportunity to provide the rest of the updates. So you would recall that during the TRRC, there was a medical board that was put in place to cater to the needs of victims that needed urgent medical attention. But after the TRRC concluded its sittings, that board was dissolved. And whilst we were putting in place the Reparations Act, we realized that there was a need for the medical support to continue. So the Ministry of Justice reached out to the Ministry of Health, and the medical board was reconstituted. And last month, the Ministry of Finance contributed $8 million towards the work of that board. The primary reason for setting it up is to assist victims that need urgent medical attention that cannot maybe necessarily wait for the final reparations to be administered. Because as you may know, there are different forms of reparations. Reparations is not just necessarily financial compensation, but it could be in the form of medical support and other forms of support. So that is what the government is trying to achieve with the establishment of the medical board. And it's also important to highlight the fact that since January 2024, the Ministry of Justice has established a dedicated unit that is working entirely on focusing solely on transitional justice. And we call it the post-TRRC unit. So that is the unit that is responsible for coordinating the recommendations of the TRRC, which were approximately about 263 recommendations that are cross-cutting on different aspects from justice and accountability, which the SG spoke about earlier. We have matters relating to reparations, matters relating to peace and reconciliation, and other aspects of transitional justice. So the post-TRRC has mechanisms that it has in place to coordinate the reparations, the implementation of the recommendations. Because if you have 263 recommendations across approximately about 61 different agencies that have roles to play, if you've had the chance to read the implementation plan, which was launched by the President in this very building in May 2023, you'd realize that we have different institutions, not just necessarily the Ministry of Justice. Generally, when we talk about transitional justice, the tendency is to think that it's the Ministry of Justice that has the sole responsibility, but there are so many factors, so many issues at play. So basically all the ministries have a role to play. So that is why we have a National Steering Committee, which had its inaugural meeting in June. So that comprises different permanent secretaries, because they all have specific recommendations that targets their institutions. So that is one of the coordinating mechanisms that we have. And we also have another coordinating mechanism, which is the victim town hall, because we believe that there should be that opportunity for the victims to have a direct interface with the Ministry of Justice and with the government officials as well. So far, we have carried out 2 victim town halls. The first one we had was, we had it within the GBA. It was held at the Memory House, and the purpose of that town hall was to inform victims about the services that the medical board provides. So we had the doctors that are sitting on the board. They met with the victims, and the setup of the victim town hall is quite unique, because we don't have, cameras or the press, or it's just basically victims being very honest to government, and government in turn being very honest to the victims, because the idea is to ensure that there's transparency in the entire process. So we've had 2 of such meetings. The first one was in the GBA, and the second meeting was held in Janjanbureh, and this was recently held in the end of June, towards the last week in June. We also have the partnership platform, which we've had 2 meetings so far. The partnership platform is basically between government and partners that are working in the development space in the Gambia. So we know that some of the recommendations, generally TJ programs are quite expensive to run, so you need to have as much support as you can. So we've been working closely with the partners. And the 4th coordinating mechanism is the one where we would be talking with the CSOs and the media to be giving them updates, because if we do not give the media regular updates, there's a likelihood that there would be, misinformation, or some misconceptions may be spread. So we're trying as much as possible to ensure that we have frequent updates with the media. And we also have some task force that we've put in place. Like SG mentioned, the massacre that happened here, we had about almost 50-something West African nationals that were enforcedly disappeared. And we also had other Gambians, several people that were missing and their whereabouts are not known. So as part of the TRRC recommendations, there was a recommendation for a task force to be put in place that will look into the whereabouts of some of the victims of enforced disappearance who, for example, their graves are not known, or who their burial sites or who their whereabouts are still uncertain. So that task force is in place, and they've met twice, and it's chaired by the Ministry of Justice, and we have other institutions like the police, the army, the SIS, all key stakeholders, including victim organizations, as a part of that task force. And the major role of the task force is to chart a way forward in terms of what can be done to ensure that burial sites are identified. And once you identify the burial sites, what happens next? Because these are very critical issues where people need to know the whereabouts of their loved ones. But it's also very, it's very technical, but you require a lot of funding, because to exhume graveyards, it requires a lot. So they've been trying, they already have their terms of reference, and now they're trying as much as possible to forge partnerships with maybe relevant institutions outside of the Gambia that may have the capacity to assist. And another update I would give is just on archiving, which is basically another task force that we have established to look into what will be done with the materials that emanated from the TRRC. So we had documents, we had other equipments, and these are generally, as a TJ process, when you're wrapping up your process, you need to archive it for generations yet unborn, so that anybody that is doing some research, or generally people may want to know in the next 10, 40, 50 years what transpired or what happened, they would have the access. So how do you preserve the material? So that is why we have an archiving task force, which was actually also a recommendation from the TRRC to put in place a mechanism to archive the materials that emanated from the TRRC. So
that's fine. We can stop now.
Okay, just
we can take questions.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take questions.
Thank you very much.
Doctor, thank you so much. I think at this stage we could be open to questions or any comments on the updates we have provided.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I work for Block TV. My question is with regards to the draft constitution, because I want to know which constitution are you bringing, because there was a prior consultation where there were arguments that if the constitution is tampered, it might still be thrown out of the parliament. So my question is whether there are adjustments to the draft constitution that you intend to bring before the National Assembly. Thank you.
Yes, you will recall there is only one draft constitution, and this is the one that was the subject matter of an act of parliament, the one that established the act of parliament established the Constitution Review Commission, which did its work for a 3-year period, carried out extensive deliberations, and came out with a draft. It is the same draft that Cabinet considered, and it is the draft that will be taken to the National Assembly for consideration. Whether there are adjustments to it, I believe that's the prerogative of Cabinet. That's for Cabinet to decide. But it's the same draft that has been considered, the draft that was submitted by the Constitution Review Commission. Thank you.
A question from a member of the public, the review program last week, and someone called in to ask a question concerning the TRRC recommendations. And the question is, the TRRC white paper identified and recommended people who are adversely mentioned they were mentioned for violating or for committing gross violations of human rights under the leadership of Yahya Jammeh, and that they must be prosecuted. What concrete steps have been taken by the government so far to prosecute these individuals, and when do we see prosecution to take place?
Thank you, Doctor. You will recall recently the National Assembly passed two important legislations. One, that was the Special Accountability Mechanism Act and the Special Prosecutor's Office Act. And I have talked about the special tribunal, which we are trying to establish, which we are in the process of establishing with the Economic Community of West African States. Now, these are the mechanisms that we have rolled out for purposes of justice and accountability. These are the institutions, these are the tools that will be used to conduct the trial. So the process is on, and we are actually, at this moment, constituting the office of the special prosecutor. The special prosecutor would carry out the investigations again and also determine prosecutions. So that process is on, and the legislations have been put in place for the special accountability mechanism as well as the special prosecutor's office. Now, the special tribunal, you will recall that some of the crimes that took place here, such as identified by the TRRC, such as torture, enforced disappearance, and widespread sexual and gender-based violence. These are crimes against humanity. These are not crimes that we can ordinarily try under our courts. That's why we are resorting to the establishment of a special tribunal that would have the mandate, authority, and jurisdiction to try these crimes. So the process is on, and government is fully committed towards this process, and that is why we went before the ECOWAS institutions to establish this special tribunal. So we would very soon see these institutions put in place. It's important that we recognize that it takes time and we need resources to establish these institutions. I think what is important is the commitment by the government to have these mechanisms in place, and that process is on. Thank you.